One of the people who is a leader in doing this work is Rear Admiral John Mauger from the 1st District Coast Guard here in New England. He assumed the duties of commander of the 1st District in May of 2022, oversees all Coast Guard missions across the 8 states in the Northeast. He has previously served as the Assistant Commandant for Prevention Policy, responsible for the development of national policy standards and programs promoting marine safety, security, and environmental stewardship. He also has a background in cybersecurity as well, getting back to the evolving threat landscape and making sure that we as a country are keeping up. So I want to thank you, Admiral, for your presence here today, for your leadership, and we all look forward to hearing your remarks. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right, good morning. Oh, we can do better than that. I know it. Come on. Good morning. Hey, there we go. Hey, Congressman Magaziner, thanks so much for that kind introduction and for sharing your insights here with us this morning. Mayor Tsai, it's great to see you as well. Thanks for braving the rain to come out and spend some time with us again. And thanks for opening up this beautiful city for all of us to enjoy. I'd like to also thank Molly and Tim for their support. It really is an honor to be here this morning to talk with you about why this matters to the Coast Guard, why the work that you do matters to the Coast Guard, and how you can help us going forward. I don't know about you, but I've been really energized by the speakers, by the exhibits down on the floor, and particularly by the conversations around the table over the course of the past 2 days or day and a half. Yesterday, we heard about the decisive decade, or in the case of the China Maritime Studies Institute, the decisive FIDIP, and a clarion call for us to remain focused on our #1 military priority, deterring and defeating Chinese aggression. We also heard from Senator Whitehouse and learned about Zeta Joules and how climate change is affecting our economy and our military readiness, and that's going to happen during our lifetimes. We also gained new insight from our speakers and from the exhibitors about how DoD and the Navy in particular are employing new alliances, new technology, and new concepts of operation to get after these challenges and unleash new opportunities. And there's still, the good news is there's still a great lineup of speakers and discussion that's going to happen today. My dear neighbor and friend here, Brigadier General Tribula, is going to talk about the Army and what they're doing on their side. And so I would encourage you to remain excited about that and the opportunities ahead. But what I wanted to do for a few moments is just draw a thread between all of these discussions that we've been having and how they work through the United States Coast Guard. And I want to do that because our operating domain is just so complex, and it's growing increasingly even more so. We have a broad range of authorities and responsibilities that is derived from over 233 years of continuous service to our nation. And that means that we have the opportunity to be involved in each one of these topical areas that we've been discussing. So 27th Commandant of the Coast Guard, Admiral Linda Fagan, is clear-eyed about the challenges we face in the decisive decade ahead and the Coast Guard's unique role and value to our nation's national security, both here at home and abroad all around the globe. With strong support from our secretary, from the administration, and from Congress, we are in the midst of the largest recapitalization of the Coast Guard's aircraft and cutter fleet that we've seen since World War II. And the skilled craftsmen that are putting these ships and aircraft together and the game-changing technology that you and your employees are adding really make us much more capable going forward. And they're changing the way that we're going to operate and employ our resources to meet these challenges. And so as the Commandant talks about, the way ahead and the rapidly changing operating environment in the decisive decade, she notes that tomorrow looks different, so will we. And she set upon a program of modernizing the Coast Guard by transforming our total workforce, by sharpening our competitive edge, and by advancing mission excellence. And so while the road ahead is filled with complex challenges, I have seen our Coast Guard Sentinels perform amazingly, even under the most toughest, most difficult operating environments. And so I stand here before you excited and inspired about the opportunities ahead, and really grateful to be in this position to lead. So I mentioned a few minutes ago that I was going to draw a line through the discussions that we've had. And so let me talk for a moment about some of those key points. We talked about deter and defeat China. And so check, the Coast Guard's involved in that role. We're currently working in support of Indo-PACOM and the national security strategy to operate our cutters in the Taiwan Straits, to increase presence throughout Oceania, to form new partnerships and new alliances, to combat illegal, unregulated, underreported fishing across Oceania, and put pressure on Chinese aggression while strengthening partnerships in the area. We talked about climate change and decarbonization. Check. Coast Guard is working with the State Department, with Environmental Protection Agency, and other allies to develop alternative fuels and to reduce or eliminate carbon emissions in the commercial maritime industry. I'm going to talk more about decarbonization in a moment and how that's reshaping the commercial shipping industry and present some unique challenges to us. We talked about leveraging autonomous technology to improve maritime domain awareness and conduct missions. And so check. Coast Guard cutters are operating in partnership with Task Force 59 in the Persian Gulf to develop the operational concepts and provide the Fifth Fleet with the maritime domain awareness that they need to conduct their missions. As SecNav mentioned, the lessons learned from those are being brought back here closer to home, and we're using autonomous systems to form sentries on our maritime borders in key locations down in the Caribbean and in the Eastern Pacific. We talked about developing and employing expertise and submarines in undersea warfare through the AUKUS Alliance for Asymmetric Advantage in the Pacific. Now, I know what you're thinking here. He is not going to say check, right? Well, okay. All right. Maybe this is one where the Coast Guard doesn't, have a leading role or isn't a key partner. But I think many of you know earlier this summer, I led the search for Titan submersible out on the wreck of the Titanic site in the North Atlantic. And I was grateful to have the strong support from NAVSEA, from Fleet Forces, from COMSUB-4, from the UK Royal Submarine Force, and had a UK Royal Submariner integrated into our unified command as we conducted the search for that submersible. And there's going to be many lessons learned as we continue our investigation. But this incident was a reminder that the ocean's depths are still incredibly complex. But like space, it's going to be increasingly commercialized, and it's no longer just the purview of nation-state activity. So this is an area that we as the Coast Guard will also need to focus on. So the relevance of our Coast Guard missions and the increasing complexity of the rapidly changing environment is why I am so thrilled to be here, to be part of this conference today and yesterday. If we're going to be successful in building a future that looks different from today and meeting the challenges of the decisive decade, then I'm going to need your help. And so I thought I'd spend a few minutes with you this morning talking about who we are in the 1st Coast Guard District and providing you with some context for our changing operating environment. And so as I look around the room, I know I have colleagues here from DC, Virginia, South Carolina, and I realize that SENEDIA is at this point much larger than just New England. But as the Coast Guard's 1st District Commander, I'm really going to focus on my area of responsibility, the beautiful coastline here along New England. And in doing so, I hope to appeal to both your professional and personal interests, particularly if you're someone that enjoys spending time on the beautiful waters of Narragansett Bay and our surrounding coastline. Whoops. Too quick. All right. So there you have a sense of our area of responsibility, or my area of responsibility, the 1st Coast Guard District. For those of you that aren't familiar with the 1st Coast Guard District, this is really where it all started for the Coast Guard. Our founding father, Alexander Hamilton, sat down at his desk in New York City and penned the Federalist paper that called for a few small ships judiciously placed at the entrance to the nation's harbors would make useful sentinels for the law. A year later, he commissioned the first revenue cutter officers at the Customs House down there in New York. Our first revenue cutter was built and launched in the Merrimack River up in Newburyport, Massachusetts. And the nation's oldest lighthouse and the nation's oldest continuous operating lighthouse. So let me just tell you something. When you have an AOR that spans New York sports teams to Boston sports teams, you always have competition about, hey, who's the best in this and who's the best in that, who's been around the longest, who's got the best record, and there's a fine point to all that. And so when it comes to lighthouses, we have both the oldest lighthouse and the oldest continuous operating lighthouse because everybody wants to be first. So if you did a DNA test on the Coast Guard, you would find that our DNA comes from these communities here in coastal New England. And we have the opportunity to celebrate the heroes that set that culture for the modern day Coast Guard. And these are heroes like Ida Lewis, who manned the lighthouse right here offshore of Fort Adams at the turn of the 20th century, when our nation was growing rapidly due to industrialization, international commerce, and immigration. And Ida Lewis served with distinction during that time, both manning the lighthouse and saving lives here in Newport Harbor. And so it's an honor to be part of this history and lead the current generation of women and men who serve in communities all across this region. The slide lists our 11 statutory missions, and we conduct all of them right here in New England. But while it breaks it out in more detail, let me just summarize by simply saying we protect, we defend, and we save wherever our maritime interests are at risk. And so today we have 12,000 women and men responsible for over 2,000 miles of coastline from northern New Jersey to Canada and up the Hudson River to Lake Champlain. Nearly half of that force is comprised of auxiliary volunteers who donate their time and support to our missions in increasingly diverse ways. Our 1st District auxiliaries teach boating safety courses. They conduct courtesy safety exams. They patrol our waterways on both the surface and the air. They train our crews. They cook. They translate. They provide ministry. And they also augment our cyber forces. There's really no limit to how our auxiliaries serve our Coast Guard today. And I hope that you'll take advantage of the resources that they provide, the training and exams, or consider even volunteering and joining this corps of folks. The broad authorities and diverse mission sets are part of what makes our Coast Guard unique as a national instrument of national security. And so whether it's responding to oil spills, conducting fisheries boarding, prosecuting drug interdictions, or breaking a navigable channel through the ice, our members are adaptable, bureaucratically multilingual, and possess a bias for action. And so this combination allows us to lead in an increasingly complex operating environment. But let me give you a sense of how that operating environment is changing, and more importantly, how you can help. So I'm going to start at the top center and talk about some of the changes that are going on, and then work my way clockwise around the slide. At the top center of the slide, you see the Coast Guard's newest class of cutters, the Sentinel class of fast response cutters. I'm really excited to say that we have 6 of these fast response cutters home ported in Boston, and by the 3rd quarter of next year, I will have all 6 up and running and patrolling along the waters of throughout New England, from northern New Jersey all the way up to Canada. So these FRCs provide a modernized approach to how we conduct our missions of search and rescue, living marine resources, and ports and waterways and coastal security. For me, they are a welcome array to the variety of Coast Guard cutters that I have working the area to protect, defend, and save all along the New England coast. Protecting New England's maritime sea lanes, those who serve at sea, and the region's rich natural resources are top priorities for the crew of 24 aboard each of these cutters. For our Coast Guard members, what this means is the fast response cutter provides a larger, more stable platform from which to conduct operations. It has a safer cutter boat launch and recovery in heavy seas via its stern ramp, and it's got the ability to detect threats at longer range and uses remote operations to protect the crew, and it has the capacity to remain on station for longer periods of time. So the advanced command and control suites on board these cutters and improved seakeeping make the fast response cutter a state-of-the-art asset for New England's region. And so in the 7 months that I've had some of these cutters operating, they've already been game changers and force multipliers. Their endurance and seakeeping, command and control, and crew accommodation allow us to push these cutters out to the far reaches of our borders and keep them out there for longer periods of time. And so they've conducted over 100 safety inspections, responded to mariners in distress, and patrolled and protected our entrance to nation's ports during key national security events. One of these cutters is equipped with a unique counter-unmanned aerial systems technology that's really vital to enhancing our interoperability and interagency partnerships, and also securing our maritime communities throughout the region, particularly during national security events. And so the Counter-Unmanned Aerial System, or CUAS, Shipboard Electronic Layered Defense System, which we call C-Shield, is a fully integrated and mobile system with a common user interface that collectively provides a layered approach to detection, tracking, identification, and defeat of UAS threats operating within the maritime domain. And so this capability in these cutters is a recognition that the increasingly complex maritime environment, we're going to need the ability to detect and disrupt threats to our ports and waterways security in the surface, in the air, and in the subsurface domains. And so I think that that's a challenge that all of you have the expertise to help us address. In the next picture, you see fishermen working here in New England. And one of the main drivers for having these cutters up here is to protect New England's vital fishing industry. Across New England and around much of the world, the industry provides food for our families. And so I'm really grateful for the work that our fishermen do and the support that they get from their families by earning a living out on the water. But we're also at the same time committed to protecting their lives while also conserving the nation's fisheries and protecting our EEZ from foreign encroachment while also enforcing our domestic living marine resource laws and ensuring compliance with international agreements. And so we train our members to conduct fisheries enforcement missions at our regional training centers in Cape Cod. And we work very closely with our partners in NOAA and National Marine Fisheries Services and the Fish Management Council here in the area to develop and enforce the management plans while looking out for the fishermen themselves. One of the ways that we are able to manage this mission is by using surveillance and at-sea boardings. And so surveillance of closed areas is normally performed by our mid-range patrol aircraft that operate out of Cape Cod and fly over the closed areas on a daily basis. But we see going forward that then our enforcement is carried out by our fast response cutters, our buoy tenders that are home ported here in Newport, and by small boat stations up and down along the coast. But as we go forward, we see that the high stakes involved in commercial fishing provides for a complex network of both parties and regulations. And so while we rely heavily on our ability to ingest, process, analyze, and act on large data sets to understand this environment and focus our resources, we know that going forward, we're going to have to get better use of AI, and ML will provide us the opportunity to really process even more data in the future and enable us to be more efficient and more effective in our missions to both protect the fishermen and the living marine resources. I talked about the importance of the maritime transportation system. And so down in the bottom right-hand corner there, you see pictures of the MTS and our icebreakers that are maintaining the channels. Just take for a moment how important our MTS is to the nation. It accounts for 25% of US GDP, comes across our maritime transportation system, and it provides employment for 1 in 7 Americans. I know that for those of you in the ocean state, you understand this implicitly, but it's literally how we get our crops and raw materials to international markets. It's how we get the shirts on our back. It's how we get the shoes on our feet, the food on our table. All of that comes through the maritime transportation system. Particularly importantly for this audience, it's also how we project power and influence all around the globe. And so the ports of New York, New Jersey, Providence, Boston account for about 1/3 of this economic value within the nation's MTS. And so protecting this vital resource and ensuring that it remains safe and secure and open for commerce year-round is job one for the 1st Coast Guard District. Earlier, I mentioned the Coast Guard's role in decarbonizing the commercial shipping, and as the nation's lead federal maritime regulator, we're responsible for ensuring the safety, security of our ports and the ships that sail on them, along with their sustainability. And so what we see happening in the maritime domain right now in the commercial shipping industry is that they're being driven by 3 challenges, right? First, there's a desire to get more capacity out of the maritime transportation system. And you see this reflected in new uses of the waterway. You see this reflected in larger vessels. You see this reflected in greater development. At the same time, there's a desire to have zero impact. And so zero impact, yesterday we talked about zero impact in terms of decarbonization, but it's really much broader than that. It's about no impact from commercial shipping from design all the way to shipbreaking. And so that's a big challenge. And then the last challenge is the only way that you can do more with less is by becoming increasingly complex. And so we see increasingly complex systems that are designed to optimize commercial shipping and commercial shipping operations. And so these drivers are ushering in significant changes for our maritime environment. The desire to get more out of the system, both on the water and in the ports, can only be realized with effective governance. And so the challenges and opportunities come from the fact that we're engaging in a digitally native environment where data is a commodity and there are vast amounts of it. And so the only way that we're going to be effective as regulators going forward is to be able to harness this data and information through things like continuous monitoring and data collection. And so the only way that fully autonomous vessels are going to be able to safely navigate is by incorporating artificial intelligence and continuous information exchange. And so managing all of this data flow and, more importantly, securing all of this information flow are key issues that we're going to need to deal with now and increasingly so in the future. This also presents great opportunity for us. It presents opportunity to do our work, our regulatory oversight work in new ways. But we're going to need help being able to incorporate all of those approaches into our work while we also ensure adequate cybersecurity. And if there's folks here that want to talk about cybersecurity in our ports, I'm happy to talk during the Q&A about what we're doing across New England. Down in the bottom center there, you see offshore wind, and I think everybody that's in this area understands how important offshore wind is within New England. As President Biden set his goal to generate 30 gigawatts of offshore power by 2030, we are seeing dramatic changes to the ports all across New England and our waterways as well. There are about 27 active leases in various stages of development in federal waters across the First District today, with several conducting preparatory work and 2 already setting the foundations to be able to generate power later this year. And so within the Coast Guard, we're focused on 3 areas regarding offshore wind: maritime governance, mariner safety, and execution of Coast Guard missions. With regard to maritime governance, this is a realization that we need to incorporate new uses for the waterways while also ensuring safe navigation and safe use for shipping, fishing, and other existing activities. And so to do this, we've conducted port access route studies across the New England region and have developed recommended routing measures for the coastal entrances to our major ports. We're working with our headquarters staff to incorporate these recommendations into regulations which will span the entire Atlantic coast fairway routes and all along the eastern seaboard. Locally, we've also worked with the developers in BOEM to ensure that wind farms use consistent layouts, spacing, and marking to aid in navigation safety on the water. With respect to mariner safety, there's going to be a dramatic increase in the number of mariners working offshore here in New England. With the 2 projects that are already under construction now, there are nearly 24 vessels working on a daily basis out on those 2 sites. And as we get into the operation, maintenance and service vessels are going to continuously sail on the waters offshore of New England to service the towers. And so we're working very closely with the leaseholders and their contractors and operators to ensure that the vessels meet adequate safety standards for year-round operations in New England waters. And then lastly, we need to be able to conduct Coast Guard missions in this increasingly complex waterway as well. And so as we gain more of these installations across the region, how we conduct our missions is going to change. The turbine blades on these installations are as long as 105 meters long. And so what that means is we're going to have to contend with new ways to conduct search and rescue operations in and around the wind farms. So today we're working with the operators to ensure that there's adequate monitoring, that we have aligned and coordinated response plans to be able to conduct our missions effectively in the wind farms. This is a substantial change for the maritime domain within the First District and all along the eastern seaboard. And so we've already seen the companies with expertise in underwater technology assist in the development and with seafloor mapping, cable routing, and acoustic mitigation during the construction phases. I look forward to your insights on leveraging new ways to conduct our missions and ensure the safety of the waterways in this increasingly complex environment. The bottom left-hand corner there is a focus on autonomous vehicles, and we've already talked quite a bit about autonomous vehicles in this conference. And while there's still limited examples of domestic autonomous vehicles in the industry, as these new industries emerge in the maritime domain, we are seeing growth in this area across the First District. And so we look at autonomous vehicles through 3 lenses. First, how we use autonomy to conduct and further Coast Guard missions. Second, how we need to prepare ourselves to detect and defeat autonomous vehicles being used by illicit actors in the maritime domain. And then third, how do we shape the regulatory environment for maritime autonomy through our role as the federal maritime regulator? So earlier this year, we published a strategy for unmanned systems at the headquarters level that explains each of those 3 lines of effort. Within the Coast Guard's First District, we're seeing increasing requests for the use and exploration of unmanned systems to demonstrate capability or to conduct work that's been traditionally done by manned vessels. Let me be clear, U.S. laws and international conventions set some boundary conditions for the use of autonomous systems. Within the U.S. law, with limited exceptions, it currently requires commercial vessels, U.S. commercial vessels, to be manned. International treaty and convention establishes the COLREGs, or collision avoidance at sea regulations, which provide those regulations that guide how ships interact with each other at sea. And so while these set the boundary conditions for the use of autonomous vessels at this point, there are many areas that require additional research, further development, industry standards, and work to ensure that autonomous vessels can operate safely and securely in the maritime domain. So as the technology is rapidly changing to provide continuous bandwidth and more capable sensors, this is becoming less and less of a technology problem and more of a policy problem. And so I look forward to your leadership, your industry insights to further the safe and secure use of maritime autonomous technology. I mentioned when I started about earlier this summer, I led the international response to the loss of the Titan submersible and the 5 persons on board. And so my thoughts continue to be with the family members of those lost at sea. And while this was not the outcome that we had hoped for during the search, I am exceptionally proud of the work that's been done by all of the members that integrated into that effort. So international treaty divides the world's oceans into search and rescue zone and appoints one individual to coordinate the searches for each of the zone. And so within the 1st District, our SAR zone extends out 1,350 miles to our east and literally covers thousands of square miles. In the adjacent zones, just to provide this some perspective, to the east, Portugal coordinates searches to the east of us, Canada to the north, and my colleague in the 5th Coast Guard District to the south. And the title that each individual is responsible for is called the Search Mission Coordinator, or Search and Rescue Mission Coordinator. And so that coordinator is a reflection of the reality that I don't have the own organic capability or necessary assets to respond to all areas across that zone by myself. And so it's a recognition that I have to coordinate, as do all my colleagues around the world, with others to bring the necessary and available resources to bear on the search and rescue efforts. And so we regularly exercise and conduct missions in all of our adjacent, with all of our adjacent coordinators. And this eased communications during the critical time that we faced earlier this summer. We had over a dozen different governmental agencies integrated into a virtual unified command run out of Boston, Massachusetts, to prosecute the search and be prepared to rescue. It was unusual, though, in that our searches were measured in cubic miles, not square miles. And so, like I said earlier, there's going to be a number of different safety investigations, or there are a number of ongoing safety investigations and case reviews that are being conducted by all the different authorities that have jurisdiction over the casualty and the response. And they are a critical part to how we as professionals improve our capability over time. And so we're going to learn from them. But as I said at the outset, I am immensely proud of the selfless individuals from across all of the different organizations came together to give their absolute best and solve complex challenge after complex challenge to conduct the search and be prepared to rescue. But that wasn't the only thing that happened this summer. And just in the week after Titan, we lost 2 Newark firefighters when they responded to a shipboard fire down in the port of Newark that ended up burning for days. And so my thoughts are with them as well. At the same time, catastrophic floods deluged communities across New England, putting lives and property at risk. In the past month, we've witnessed the tragic fires in Lahaina lead to a mass maritime evacuation as people literally swam for their lives to avoid the fires. a tropical storm combined with a 5.1 earthquake to rock Southern California. And then, of course, today, all of our eyes and thoughts are with the folks down in Florida who are staring down as Idalia comes ashore. And so reflecting on all of this, I can't help but feel that this level of complexity is our new normal. And as complex as these situations are, I understand that command, control, multi-domain warfighting is even more complex. And so I, in particular, welcome your insights on how to better sense, how to better understand, how to better prepare, and how better to respond to these complex, multidimensional challenges that have become the new norm for us. So with that, let me say thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to come up here and share some of the exciting things that the Coast Guard's involved in here in the 1st District, the opportunity to synthesize some of the discussion that we've had earlier today, and give you a sense of those different challenges and opportunities and what your role may be in helping us meet those challenges and opportunities. I think I have a little bit of time for questions and discussion, and I look forward to that. Thank you very much, and Semper Paratus. Stunned. All right, we have somebody coming.
Admiral, appreciate your updates, and thanks for all you do. Joe Donovan, SENEDIA board member. What we have in this room, as you're well aware, are many of the leading innovative maritime and undersea technology companies in the world. Many of them are involved with the Coast Guard, but what additional ways would you like to see them get involved with the Coast Guard? What opportunities exist for them to be able to work together to support your mission? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joe. That's a really broad question, but a really important question as well. So, across the AOR, I hope gave you a sense of the fact that the complexity of things that are happening in traditional areas and our need to push into other areas as they become more commercialized, like the undersea domain. And so I think that there's lots of opportunities to help us understand, provide the sensors, the analytics, the technology to enable us to be able to protect, defend, and save across all of the domains there in the maritime environment, the surface, subsurface, and air. We have a research and development center headquartered here in New London that puts out the RFIs and leads the different technology proof of concept and operational development for the entire Coast Guard. Of course, I partner very closely with them to get that technology transitioned and integrated into assets and operating concepts here in the 1st Coast Guard District. But I think, as I saw earlier this summer, that undersea environment is incredibly complex environment. And so as we continue to go forward, helping us to characterize, understand, and be effective operating there as well is important. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
Sir, thank you for coming here today. Appreciate it. The Coast Guard has 2 polar icebreakers. They're both very, very old. What's the plan for replacing those icebreakers?
Yeah, thanks so much. So we have we actually have one icebreaker operating, the Polar Star, that's kind of 1960s, early 70s era, and then the Healy, which is a medium endurance icebreaker, a medium icebreaker, a little bit newer technology there, but still, in the end. Then we have Great Lakes icebreakers as well. So at the polar level, we have a ongoing shipbuilding project, shipbuilding acquisition project for the Polar Security Cutter. That contract's been awarded. My colleagues at headquarters are working really hard with the shipbuilder to bring that project to fruition down at the yard in Halter. Across my AOR, we do our ice breaking up here in New England with a smaller fleet of 140-foot tugs all the way down to 65-foot tugs. And those tugs have all been out there in existence for several decades as well. And so while we keep them in great shape, this is an area that as we go forward, as we're moving down the path, we're acquiring a waterways security cutter as well to be able to service aids and work in ports and harbors. And my hope is the first district commander that as we continue to press forward, we'll look for opportunities to recapitalize those smaller ice-breaking tugs and boats that service our harbors up here.
Thanks for being here, Commandant. Don McCormick, MRC, SENEDIA board member. One of the questions, I was out sailing this weekend.
Yeah.
Narragansett Bay is always interesting with power boaters. That's you, Dennis.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
just curious, we're watching the autonomous cars in San Francisco, tying up traffic and all the rest. Commodore talked about one of the high-end USVs that he had working in, doing actually, collision avoidance. Just kind of wondering, how does the Coast Guard get comfortable with this future of autonomous vehicles?
Yeah, it's a really difficult challenge. Like I said, there's a couple boundary conditions. U.S. law, international treaty really set the floor. And in the case of commercial cargo operations, the law says you have to have a man on board with some exceptions. The current exception right now is for catching SpaceX's rocket as it falls back from outer space. That's a pretty good reason for an unmanned vessel out there, right? As a rocket comes falling back from space, having it land on that unmanned ship is a good thing. But we've worked closely, in the picture there, you have the Data Moran, Mayflower 2 came in the area. What we've really focused on is within 12 miles, within the coastal zone, having those larger autonomous vehicles that are out there being within the command and control of a watchful mariner responsible for that operation of the vessel. Outside the coastal zone, a little bit broader opportunity. We've had autonomous vessels conducting surveys for the wind farm operations. These are smaller boats, but working there with subsurface vessels conducting surveys and that work as well. And so we're trying to move definitely forward, but taking into account the risks that are presented in the coastal zone versus further offshore, and bringing that together. What we've seen around the world and in one area of the Great Lakes is other communities have come together to set up autonomous testing zones or waterways that are used for the test and development of that technology. And so I think that could be an opportunity in this region as well if we can find the right water space, because we really do want to see this technology move forward and advance. We think that it brings some tremendous opportunities to enhance our capability to conduct missions, to provide other opportunities for the maritime industry. But right now we're dealing with, kind of smaller vessels, monitoring, very careful monitoring and attendance inside the coastal zone, and then a little bit more freedom and maneuver out in international waters. Good. Well, hey, thanks again for the time. Be here for a little bit longer this morning. Appreciate any discussions in the margins. And again, thanks for all your support and Semper Paratus.
Admiral, thank you very much, sir, and thank you for your service. What an unexpected turn you took in the spring. All right, we're going to go off into a break now. So we break now until 9:45. So 30-minute break. We'll see you back here in a little bit. Thank you.